it leads us to two purposes of play that I at least am confident exist. And their actual expression in terms of procedures at the table, of course, is nigh infinite, right? Because we are talking at this level of social satisfaction. And so that's fine. I mean, we can talk about those purposes and everything. But one thing I'll tell you is that once people do find the medium congenial and reliable, and they find together a group, find with other people these easily arrived at, easily understandable, 100% human priorities with that medium, they stop talking about purpose of play, because why would you talk about something that's that obvious? So in many ways, talking about the purpose of play is doomed. It's a trap, because if you go through the door where it's no longer an issue, then you wonder why the fuck we're talking about it. And beforehand, most of the time, you're just so struggling with the medium that you have no ability to talk about the purpose. So in many ways, understanding purposes of play is like this one moment. It's one moment where you suddenly realize, oh, wait a minute, that was easy. Why were we arguing about that? So to me, is still a critical point from a theoretical perspective. And it's also a critical point in terms of understanding what you do if you're interested in design. But it's not a critical point when it comes to actually the pedagogy of play, how to do it. So does that make sense too? That's a
Yep, that makes sense.
yeah.
I would just a bit of clarification on what would you say would be an example of a problem with the medium that
sure.
inhibits.
Well, I'll give you one of my favorite. Let's go to some of the guts of the medium, okay? And this is what we call mechanics and system and stuff like that, right? So let's go to the guts of the medium. Let's go deep into the guts of the medium, in fact. So not scenes and not backstories and not settings, which are all great, but they're pretty big parts of the fiction, right? Let's go down to that goblin getting decapitated. So you've got your skilled fighter, and we all know you're a badass with your axes, not just one, two. And you and the other characters are standing around at the crossroads, and you know that the goblins and half goblins of the area are a big problem. Who knows? Maybe it's a social problem and it can all be worked out if everybody would just talk. Or maybe they're demonic and, we just got to eradicate them. I don't know. I don't care. That's the situation. But at the moment, you and the other members of your little team and your group or whoever they are at the crossroads, and the goblins have come and they're going to get you, right? They've sprung the trap, right? The ambush has appeared, right? And the head of the band swaggers out, and he's only 4 feet tall, but he looks meaner than all of you put together. And he comes out and he says, something challenging, something, whatever, something annoying too. And you say, in the middle of everybody like role playing their characters, and half the people in your table are not stating actions for their characters, but they're sort of shouting weird half actions like, am I behind the bush? Right? Is that play or is that not play? Are they trying to get behind the bush? Are they behind the bush already? Is this person still in the cart or not? What's going on? What are my options for speaking right now? Do I know, right, what's up? It's really, I mean, if the group can't get their shit together about that, things will devolve into half actions and non-actions and stated actions that people assume that their character has made. Oh no, says the GM, you haven't done that yet. Wait, what? You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
This is called the MERP. I have a name for it. I have very, very little terminology these days, less than 5 terms. I've boiled it down into 5 useful terms. One of them is MERC. when you don't know how you talk relates to what you do, like with dice or whatever, to get something to happen or to see how something happens. If you
Right.
don't know. Collectively in the group, across us, we struggle with that just for the most ordinary basic notion of what happens next. That's the murk. Now, to give you a very specific example, let's say all that's fine and the group is very non-murky. But you're playing a game, let's say any iteration of D&D, just to pick on it, but it's not alone in this, not alone at all. And you, Axeman, say, I throw my axe at him. You tell me, in the latest game you played, what's the last role-playing game you personally played?
Probably Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, to be honest.
Okay, right there, that's fine. I play it with my kids. So, you say, I throw my axe at him. In that game, what is the thing for the group, the DM, everybody to do? Is it to roll initiative in order to see when you get your axe thrown relative to everyone else's action? Or is the axe in the air when we move to the next systemic step? You know those rules.
Right.
What do they say? They don't.
They don't say anything on that specific.
Do you see what I mean about embedded murk?
Yeah, I
Right.
see what you mean.
So there's murk just in general, right? Where everybody's just dithering and, shouting and trying to get some advantage or because nobody knows. And then there's systemic places where murk is like baked into how we do it, which is shit. That's terrible design. I'm not saying that it all needs to be a cookie cutter and that we always just, that there's no room for saying things. Far from it. But there are ways to design in which that particular kind of embedded murk is simply absent, and we know.
Yep.
And so this is something that I can say also is not solved just by saying, oh, just talk it out. Just talk it out. Figure it out. That's not a solution. Because when you watch people at the table, they can't. There's going to be a big-ass argument about whether that axe was in the air or not. Whether your character is like this or like this. Right? With the arm coming down in front. Which is it? So these things are... And you should have known before you said, I throw my axe, right? You should have known which it is. So you know where you stand in terms of how we're going to operate the mechanics.
Yeah.
It's only fair. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable expectation. But what if you say, oh, well, it's a ruling, not a rule. So that means the DM can make it up whichever way he wants, depending on whether he wants the goblin to live or not? Fuck that noise. Right? You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I see what you're getting at.
So the notion here is when we talk about a fun experience, it has to be non-murky. And it also, although talking is obviously the medium in and of itself, the procedural ways by which we establish that we're not just talking and now things are going to be established to be happening, and in what zones of fiction those procedures kick in and matter, what things are not handled by those procedures and what things are. And also, here's the biggie, contingency in the middle of it all, right? Things that are not going to be controlled by the person who establishes and however it is that outcomes are determined, right? If you do that, you get a circle and it's boring. You say, this is the problem, oh, and this is how it turns out. What you need is some way for it to be contingent. The most obvious way of contingency is dice, but believe me, that's just one bit of how contingency can occur. One of the most important is the ways of permitting non-consensual input regarding what everybody is doing. Non-consensual input about what everyone is doing produces an immense amount of contingency right there. Right? Stuff like that. Things so that you don't really know how it's going to turn out. But however it turns out, we all look back and say, yeah, that's how it could have turned out. I get that.
Yeah.
Right. So dice are involved, but you can have dice, but a shit design too. So that doesn't happen and they're just dice.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an important point. I call that bounce. Right. You don't want to play a game with a flat ball.
Yeah.
The ball's got to have some property that makes it fun to play with this game. So that's what I'm talking about, this bounce quality to the procedures, whatever they are, and however it's established. So does that work too?
Yep, that works.
Yeah. So there's aspects of that. Then we can talk about many other guts of play that are universal to play, regardless of how they're structured by person. We could talk about that kind of stuff, and that's fine. The only other one that I'll mention right now is that we need to also consider how things change. What is a character like before the events of play and after the events of play? What is a situation like before the events of play, after the events of play? These are incredibly important variables, and that when you assess a game design, that's really the variable you ought to examine. And then all of the procedures of play become routines by which that occurs. A good way of looking at it is a role-playing game is the reproductive method by which a character sheet makes another character sheet.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good way to. I mean, it's a little bit constrained. Not all games have character sheets. Blah blah blah. But the principle is a good one, right? That notion.
Yeah.
Right. So with these concepts in mind, you will find that talking about system and choices about what you want to do for system become brutally clear, because it's the way you want to do that this time. It's the way you want to do that for this game you're designing, or it's the way you want to do that for how you feel like playing today. Given that big model picture, right, of social leisure activity with these people at this time for this purpose, which is so intuitive that you don't even think of it as, you didn't have to write it down. You didn't have to discuss it. Playing on purpose is easy, not hard. Once you've got this zone going, or rather you're hoping it gets going, or you're looking forward to it getting going, then you say, what is the imagined situation? What is aesthetically exciting about it for me? And how would it change through play? What are the things that it can change about the characters, about the situations? Then talking about the way we do it and whether doing it this way is fun for us is really, really easy. Because there's no one answer. There's going to be 1,000 ways, 100,000 ways. Question is, which way is fun for you to do it for that purpose? So that's why system does matter. But it doesn't matter because it's the atoms and everything else just follows from it. That's not the case. So are you seeing kind of where I'm coming? This is the concept at Adept Play. I have presentations about it. We revisit it in 100 different ways about specific details of play, both by talking about the games we play, by having seminars, and I try to implement it or to model it for people through the consulting.
Yeah.
So that's really
that makes sense.
Yeah. And so, but the idea is that I will tell you that it is frustrating. The site physically does not yet do what I want, which is allows you to go and see all the things that you could investigate on your own interests, based on your own interests. That's what I'd really like. The idea, like when you go to a bookstore site, you can click, oh, look, they have mysteries. Click, I want to look at the mysteries, right? Or, what about the free books? Oh, click, I want to look at the free books, or whatever. The way you want to go in there and parse what's there should be transparent. So that's what I'd really, really like. And I don't think the site has it, but working on it. I'm working on it.